everyone. Thank you so much for joining me again. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and commenting and liking and sharing if you find this content and information useful. I wanted to do a short, quick video on advocacy as a parent. So if you are not a parent, unfortunately, I'm sorry, you're going to have to catch me in the next video. This video is specific for parents, or even if you're a new parent, or if you're going to be a parent in the future, please stay. So today I want to talk to you a little bit about advocacy for your kids, because I'm going through a situation right now that calls for me to advocate for my children in a way that I have not done on this level before. And so, without going into too much personal details into what is going on with my children, because it involves my children, I am having to report the agency that we are working with to the state governments and to the insurance company, and most likely it's going to have to be escalated further than that. I'm not sure. I hope not. I would really hope not. But this is where we're at. So I'm going to talk about advocating for your children as a parent, but that I also want to give you advice for advocating for your children at school, since, of course, I have been a longtime educator. So advocating for your kids, you know what's best for your kids. And even if a doctor, or even if a different type of professional, they give an opinion. Now remember, it's called practicing medicine. Okay. They're called medical practitioners. Okay, you're following me? They have opinions and they give advice based on their schooling and expertise. Now, understand this. A doctor that just barely passed medical school has the same weight and value as a doctor who excelled in medical school. So just kind of let that sink in a little bit. So whenever you walk into a doctor's office, you don't know if you're getting the doctor that skated through medical school and didn't really care or wasn't really paying attention, or unfortunately, some, and sorry, medical profession, I'm going to blow this wide open. Some medical professionals get the types of medications that aid them in getting through the day. And so you don't know if your doctor is under the influence of certain medications that may impair their judgment. Okay. So you don't know what type of doctor you're getting. And even nowadays, whenever I schedule appointments for my kids, I don't know who my kids are going to see. I don't know what doctor they're going to see. I don't know any of that. You just call, you schedule an appointment, and then you get whoever you get, right? Unless you know ahead of time, you can specifically ask for now. But nowadays, you know, if you go to schedule an appointment with a new pediatric office, you don't know who the doctor is until you show up that day for the appointment. And then you kind of get who you get, right? But this is what, especially in the medical field, is not understood, is that they are providing the patient with a service. They provide the patient with a service. Your insurance pays the doctor. even if you do not pay the doctor directly or you don't have a copay or whatever. The insurance pays the doctor. So therefore, in order for, and it's a business, so in order for you to keep coming back, they need to keep providing superior service to you. So what happens whenever you don't have superior service, as the case is that I am experiencing right now? Unfortunately, this has happened to me enough times that I know the ropes, and so I'm going to teach that to you today. The very first thing is, from the very first appointment, you need to have everything documented in writing. Everything. Because you never know, like there's Schrodinger's cat, right? You never know if you're going to get a live cat or a dead cat whenever you choose a box. And so you don't know if that doctor is going to provide you with superior service or if that doctor is just, unfortunately, and just like in any profession, there are doctors that are just there to collect paychecks. Okay. It's my experience. So you need to have very thorough documentation, always written. What happened? What did the doctor say? What were the follow-up notes? What were the treatment? All of these things. Because if you end up in a situation like I am now, where I have to report a doctor to the state, to the medical board, you are not going to have any of that documentation. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go back and chase it all down later. And that's going to be a huge waste of your time. It's going to be a huge waste of your energy. It is so much better just to start from up front, from the first visit, documenting every single thing, everything. Then you have to work up the chain of command. So if you have a problem with the nurse, or you have a problem with the therapist, or you have a problem with whoever, you have to go to the next person up and say, I'm having this issue. And then you have to document every single thing that comes out of that meeting or those interactions. Then, if nothing is resolved, then you have all of that documentation to then keep going up until someone does something. In my case, I am now at the level of the state director, who has not done very much and has not participated in the open dialogue that I have opened through via email. And that's another thing too. You need to limit the verbal communication. You've got to have everything in an email of what happened, what was decided, whatever, because then it's a he said, she said, and you have no evidence, you have no documentation. So make sure that you have to communicate in writing. Even if it's written, you have to take notes: the day, the time, the person you talked to on the phone, and what was the conversation. And then you have to keep a thorough log of that. It's unfortunate that this is the way that I have to live my life, but it is. I've had to file complaints against lots of corporations, and this has been my saving grace, is the amount and the detail that I document everything that happens. Like I said, the employee, the time, the date, and then what was the conversation that transpired. And so, dealing with companies, unfortunately, is something that I have had to become an expert in, because they, all throughout, yes, there are people that are incompetent, but whenever the entire organization is built on profiting off of children, you have to take it up a notch, right? You gotta do more. And so make sure that you do your thorough documentation. If you have a problem with a doctor, contact your state's medical board. See who it is that you need to reach out to, because depending on what type of doctor they are, they're licensed through a certain entity within the state. And so you're going to have to track down, where is that doctor state license. Now, it is public knowledge. All you have to do is go onto the internet into your browser, type in the doctor's name, the full name, and then you can get their NPI number, which is a number that is specifically designated to the doctor that tells everyone who the doctor is. And most of the time, you can get their license number. This is public information. Find it and put it inside of your documentation, because whenever you file a complaint with the state, the more prepared you are with all your documentation, the more they're going to take you seriously. Even if it's just a manager, if the manager sees that you have gone over, you have all of these records and all of this documentation, they're more likely to take you seriously than if you just show up and you just, he said, she said, this is what happened, right? They can't really do anything if they don't have evidence. And so you need to consciously be gathering together evidence of what happened. Again, it's really hard whenever you have a very sick child and to also be doing the documentation. But again, if things go south, then you don't have anything to back you up. But if you document from the first day, you have all of that documentation of everything that had gone wrong that you then can present to multiple entities, you know, depending on what your situation is. Okay, so that is kind of how to advocate for your kid on the medical side. Now let's talk about schooling. One of the most frustrating things about being a teacher had always been the adversarial perception that certain groups of parents would have with the teacher. So working with a lot of immigrants and refugees, the way that their culture is that the teacher is like a second mother or a second father. They're a second parental figure that helps to shape and guide that child. In certain other cultures, the teacher is devalued. So as a teacher, many times I was devalued by certain groups of parents that did not feel that I had their child's best interest at heart. Okay. And so what they did was kind of something similar. They would try to get all of this evidence and blah, 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 like stacks of papers and emails and all these kinds of things, you know. And so in a lot of cases, it was my saving grace that they had done that, because then that had, you know, absolved me of any wrongdoing, because then they would go to the principal and they would say these things. And they're like, well, the teacher would do this, the teacher would do that. Like, it's not, there's nothing, sorry, you got nothing here. Okay. Don't be like one of those parents. But what I'm saying to you is, like, don't have an adversarial relationship with your child's teacher. You need to collaborate. You need to cooperate together. However, I do understand, and I do know, because I have had a lot of coworkers that, just like in the medical profession, were there to collect a paycheck, and they were not serving students the way that they should have been serving students. And so in that case, what is it that you do whenever you suspect that there's a teacher of wrongdoing, or how do you move forward whenever you suspect that, especially if your child is on an IEP or a 504 plan? If your child's on a 504 or IEP plan, and then you have the documentation, you know, like, first you should try to work with the SPED teacher, or your team, in order to try to, because there are some teachers, they don't follow the IEP. I've had my coworkers that the IEP, clear as day, is like the child needs to sit near to the teacher and that kid's sitting way back in the back of the class, right? Like, that would be definitely a situation where the teacher's not following that IEP, and you went to the teacher and said it's in the IEP, it needs to happen, and it didn't happen, and then you go to the principal and then there's a conversation, right? But I'm saying that if it's kind of as a whole, a widespread kind of school issue, where you've already talked to the teacher, you've already talked to the sped teacher, you've already talked to the principal, and there's really nothing going on, and you have all of your documentation and things like that, then that's whenever you want to report that school to the state. Okay. Advocate for your child. If your child is not receiving the services that they should be receiving, go ahead. Again, you have to follow that chain of command, and you have to document everything along the way, and then you need to report that ultimately to the state. Teachers' license numbers are not public domain, whereas doctors are. So you cannot go and you cannot search up a teacher's credentials and find out their license number. But what you can do is you can absolutely record, the teacher and the principal and the name of the school whenever you're providing your documentation to the state, if you feel like your rights as a parent especially are not being fulfilled by the school. And so, make sure that you exercise those rights, because a lot of parents, they don't even know that they can. It's an IEP and a 504 are legal documents that are bound by the state. So if the school's not following that, or the teacher's not following that, there are repercussions for that. But again, you need to make sure that you have your documentation in line, or else it can be very easily dismissed. And then the same thing too, like if you have if there's a bully in the class and you've gone and you've talked to the teacher already, you've gone and you've talked to the principal already, you always have the districts, whoever is next up in the districts. So you can go to, like, so I used to work for one of the largest districts in the state. So again, who's in charge of the principal, right? So go to the district office and figure that out, and then go and file your complaint there. But again, you need to have your documentation, have all your emails where you tried to reach out, where you tried to correct the situation, where you tried to be the advocate, and it has been falling on deaf ears. Okay. But as much as possible, you want to work in a collaborative and cooperative way, anyone that is involved with your child. I will give you this example also, this horrendous example that is very unfortunate. My friend had her daughters in a charter school, and come to find out that there was a history of those adolescents that were engaged in self-harm on the playground during recess time. There was a group of them that were doing this. And the teachers that were on recess duty were not paying attention because they were not doing their job. And then my friend found out about it, and she went to the principal, and come to find out the principal had known about it, and it was a school-wide problem the entire school year. And this was about 3 weeks before the end of school that they found this out that had happened. They tried to cover it up by saying that they called her, she didn't answer, but then they didn't call any of the other emergency contacts. So what they ended up doing was putting her daughter in school suspension, which they did not tell her that they put her in school suspension. And so this school then is super guilty, because all of our, like, as a teacher, I'm a mandatory reporter for the state. If there's any instance of like harm to self or harm to another that I find out about, I have to report that to the state. None of these teachers, not the principal, not the administrators, no one in the school. So I had directed my friend to file a complaint with the state against the school. I don't know whether or not she had done that, but if that were me, I would have taken all of the documentation that I could find. I would have taken, that I had met with, not just the emails, but I would have met with the I would have any meetings that I had with the principal or teachers or anything, I would have had written documentation, any phone calls, any of that. And then I would have submitted all of that to the state. And I would have said, this entire school, unfortunately, at this point, is not serving the best needs of students. And this is a situation where it just doesn't impact your own kid, right? This is a situation where it impacts lots of students and lots of families. And so you never know, whenever you start out doing advocacy for your own children, like you don't I'll say it to you like this. If it's happening to you, it's happening to somebody else. And so at what point with which is there accountability for the way that we as professionals serve children? Okay? Whenever we are in service to others, we need to be accountable to ourselves. We need to be accountable for those kids, and we need to be accountable for the families that we serve. And so whenever decisions are made that end up hurting others, or whenever they hurt a family or they cause trauma and conflict within a family or to a family, and it can become very damaging, your role as the advocate then goes to help others, because then they can say, like this company that I'm filing the complaint against, how many other families has this happened to? Well, now, yeah, it's happening to my son, but at the same time, I'm also advocating for all of those other families too that were not receiving services that were in the best interest of their children, or that they were not receiving the education that's in the best interest of their children. And so again, I really encourage you that, because a lot of people, they don't we're taught not to be snitches, right, in our society. We've been programmed to not advocate, to be quiet, to be silent, because it's going to cause more trouble than it's worth, right? I'm sure many people have heard those sayings before, but what it ends up doing is it continues to perpetuate a cycle of abuse, of neglect, of a lot of things. And so, you hear a lot about like how bad it is to be a whistleblower, or like, snitches are bitches that get stitches, right? Like, how many people have heard that growing up, right? You don't snitch. Well, again, that is like an abuser telling you that I'm going to abuse you and you don't tell anyone, right? That's a form of abuse. And so that's another thing that really needs to change, is that parents need to understand that in all capacities, your child's teacher, the people at the school, they serve you and your child. At the doctor's office, they serve you and your child. They are providing service. You go and you pay them, whether it's through you or the insurance company. Your child gets paid to be there. The state pays the school for your child to sit in that chair every single day. Okay? In Arizona, it's $6,000 per kid, less money than it is to house an inmate. And so it's incredibly important that you exercise your ability to advocate for your children, and that you don't end up in this cycle of abuse where something happens and I don't feel empowered because I'm not a doctor. What do I know? Right? No. If you feel an injustice has been done against you, speak up about it. But at the same time, you have to have your documentation, which is incredibly important. Again, the date, the time, the conversation, or the actual documentation itself. So thank you so much for joining me for yet another video. I hope this was helpful in understanding, how to be an advocate for your child, because it's incredibly important. We grew up in a generation, again, where you don't talk about the bad things that happen, right? We don't talk about the bad things. We don't talk about the things that go wrong, right? It's hush hush. And so I really I challenge other parents to really start to, whenever things, start to get bad, go and have a conversation with who you need to have a conversation with, but have your documentation with you. Take it with you, show them that you're documenting, because I promise you that by them seeing that you have documentation, that is going to dramatically shift the conversation, because it puts you now in a place of empowerment where you can then stand up and say, no, you provide us with a service, and this is what we are expecting from you. And you hold those professionals accountable. Thanks so much. And I hope to see you in the next video.